is Karen Johnson. Today is October 21st, 2013. You are watching a series of interviews sponsored by the Proctors Historical Committee. And today we have Paul Hooker, who was very involved in creating the bartender program at Proctors. And Paul is on the phone today. You can see his wonderful picture when he was receiving an award. And we will proceed with our conversation. Paul, just tell me, what are your earliest memories of Proctors?
Well, I'm local. I lived in Scotia, Schenectady all my life, so I remember Proctors from before it was in its current state. I remember when there were 4 theaters downtown. Proctors was one of them.
And did you attend the movies at all the different theaters?
Movies, I remember they used to bring in a limited number of stage shows. And I remember 1776.
The musical.
Musical, yes. And Betty Buckley played Thomas Jefferson's wife. Now, nobody ever heard of Betty Buckley at that point, but she became Isabella in Cats and won the Tony Award for it.
Right.
Later on. And I remember Lynn Anderson, the country music singer, but mostly movies.
Mostly movies. Well, Proctors began its corporation in 1977 and in 79 had its first show. And do you know when the theater decided that it needed to serve liquid refreshment?
As I recall, 1980-81 was the first year that we had volunteer bartenders. So there were a couple of years where there were usher volunteers, but not bartender volunteers. And the whole idea was we needed to make money. We had no income except ticket sales and very few patrons. And it was Dennis Madden's idea. He called a bunch of his friends into his living room in Scotia and said, I know you guys know how to party. Let's make some money off of it. How would you like to be a bartender? Well, we all laughed and said, didn't know what he was talking about. But it was, as far as I remember, 80-81 was the first year.
And who was in that living room conversation? Do you remember any of the people who were there?
Lois Burmester Sice. Joe and Carol Ariema.
Well, it's a long time.
Joyce and Dick Bowers.
Okay.
Amy Healy.
So there were quite a group of you.
Yeah, well, initially it was friends of Dennis, as all those people are. Then we recruited people from other groups, like the local arts groups, Schenectady Civic and Schenectady Light Opera, and believe it or not, Winter Sports Club, Schenectady Winter Sports Club. And they used to use the theater to show a movie every year, and there were a lot of them.
And what product did you sell in the very beginning?
We always sold beer and wine, and that was it. Beer, wine, and soda, excuse me. We had cider, though, too. We had cider and beer and wine.
Now, as time went on, you got to be the leader of the bartender group. How did you rise to that wonderful title?
Well, that's kind of funny, because the way it worked in the first couple of years or whatever, somebody was in charge every night, but it was always a different person. Well, that wasn't working out very well at all, because you get different direction one night than you did the next night. So we had a meeting of some of the more important or the more involved people, and we designated captains. And I think there were 7 or so. And each show had one of the captains in charge. And then the captains would meet every so often to try to come up with a more uniform plan. And I was one of the first captains.
Okay, so as time passed, you got to be like the head captain or head of the bartenders.
Right, right.
And you were in that position for about how long?
Well, I've total volunteer. I volunteered for 25 years.
Wow, that's a long time because this, I think in the beginning there were not too many shows, but as time passed, didn't the work grow quite a bit?
Yes, it was, quite a few shows every weekend. Problem was assigning people to work the show so that you had enough and not too many. If you had too many, that was no good because they didn't like coming and not working. If you didn't have enough, then they had trouble carrying everything up from the basement to sell. And of course, we didn't have any computer or anything. And I remember everybody had a 3x5 card, or 3x5, yeah. And Lois was in charge of that, Lois Burmester site. And she used to shuffle those cards around, and that's how she made her list of who's going to work that night. Very primitive.
What was the obligation of the bartenders at that time? Like, how long before the show did they come? What did they have to do?
They had to come an hour and a half before the show. Because we usually needed a half hour or three-quarters of an hour to set up and carry everything up without an elevator from the basement. And then we sold for the half hour before the show when they opened the doors. We sold during intermission, and then after the show we cleaned up. So it was a fairly long commitment time-wise every night or afternoon.
Do you remember ever having a time when the shows were so big that it was just almost impossible to get through all your work?
Yes. A couple of interesting shows. The Schenectady Winter Sports Club, when they showed that movie, it sold out 2 nights, and they all drank beer. And it was really hard to keep up with them because the amount of selling time was very short. Let's see. The Sheriff's Association used to rent the theater to put on a Golden Oldies show, basically. That one was that one we could serve during the show, but they were so loud anyway it didn't matter. Normally we couldn't sell or wouldn't sell during the show. And then, let me see, I think it was Les Mis. One of the shows, the show had to end by 11 o'clock or else you had to pay the staff backstage extra money. So they were always rushing to get, I think it was Les Mis was a great big long one. And at 2 minutes to whatever intermission time was over, we had to be out of there. And sometimes it was really hard to cover the whole thing. And we had that one because it was such a big show. We had that several times.
How did the
But
dance?
most of the time we had enough time to do it.
How did the dance recitals do on selling product?
They did well. Because there were a number of fathers there who were just there under duress, and they just had to have a beer or a wine to get them through the event. And that was another interesting thing, is nobody really wanted to work the dance recitals or the graduation. So we had to require that every volunteer work at least one dance recital or one graduation. And we split it in half. You only had to do half of one. But they were busy. Especially some of the film were pretty big operations.
I'm glad you told that story because I've heard that as a rumor, so hearing it from you validates it quite a bit to me. Now, Paul, the other thing is that the bartenders received tips. I don't know whether it was from the very beginning, but from some point on. And tell me what was the purpose of doing that?
Well, that's a good question because it was a source of pride for us. I'm not sure exactly how it started, but people would have money left over from their change or whatever, and they say, where can we put this for a tip? And nobody would know what to do because we didn't have any plan. And so, am I supposed to keep it, the bartender said? No, that's not a good idea. I don't think we better keep it. We better somehow turn it into a project. So we used to make a list of potential projects, and then take it to whoever was director and say, is there anything out here you don't want? If you want everything, then we voted on what we wanted to spend our tip money for. And it took as long as it was necessary to raise the amount of money to pay for it. And we, let's see, what did we do? We bought the hearing enhancement. We bought a lot of backstage sound equipment. We actually started the tapestry. The tapestry on the walls of the main theater is real tapestry left over from the old days. They found it in Carl Company basement. And that was a huge project. It would have taken us forever to raise all that tip money. And so when one of the bartender's wives died, Al Fritz, he gave a big donation in memory of his wife, and that took care of that. And we built our own bars with that money. And we cleaned the mural in the back of the theater professionally. We gilded the part that was supposed to be gilded. We put lights on the steps. In other words, it was a whole lot of little projects, one a year or two a year, and there was some pride associated with the fact that, oh, we did that.
Mm-hmm.
The big, this is sort of different too, the big stairway when you first come into the theater and turn left to go up the stairs, there was all a railing on one side only. There wasn't any railing on the, I guess it would be the outer side. And we would be sitting there bartending and watch people pull themselves up sometimes without any railing. So that railing was designed and built and constructed by bartenders' tip money.
Great. I don't think people realize all that, and it's quite an amazing thing. And I would say all the bartenders were in the theater a lot, so they realized which projects would really be meaningful.
That's right. The lights on the stairs and the balcony were really a safety feature because you couldn't see very well, and that was a big deal. And the banister one, yes, all that's a result of us watching what was going on.
So at any one time, about how many bartenders would be in your group of bartenders?
Well, we normally had about 200.
And the group, I assume it grew and grew as time passed until you got to that number.
Yes. It didn't take very long, though. People were very anxious for Proctors to succeed. And we had a wait list most of the time that I was in charge. We had a wait list of people who wanted to bartend, but we just didn't need any more because it was, there wouldn't have been a place for them to work. And that continued almost all the way through. We took a limited number of, but once we got to 200, somebody had to drop out in order for us to take a new one. And it took a long time sometimes for people to be on the list. They were on for a couple of years. But Karen, you remember in the beginning, Save Proctors was very important to the community. Mm-hmm. Because everything was going. All the theaters left, big department stores left, and Proctors was the only thing that was a drawing card down there.
Well, you also had a great sense of camaraderie among your group, didn't you?
Yes, that was important for us to make sure it happened. You know, a lot of you guys are responsible for this and that. And we always announced at the end of the year party what show took in the most money and how much money. We're never exactly sure how much money we made because it depended on the price of the product. But we always told them how much was income. and it got to be quite significant. I figured, I think this is right, I don't know if I should be quoted on this or not, but after my 25 years, a bartenders were responsible for $2.5 million income.
I bet that's a good figure because a lot of drinking flows through, and with all the shows, there are more and more. Just amazing.
Yeah. Now, there was always, you say, a lot of drinking. There was always a concern on the part of certain board members, especially, that we get people drunk. And we were very, very careful about making sure we didn't serve anybody that was, first of all, there wasn't time to get drunk because the intermission was only 10 minutes. But we were very, very concerned. We had a special orientation that they had to attend, which they still do today, I believe. And some of them, like that sheriff's association, that was a big concern. And we would have some of the policemen help us because you could turn a person away and they could go to another bar. So we had to have, some of them had to be watched. And of course, we were just amateurs. We didn't know anything about professional bartending. But that was a very important concern.
Did the theater provide some training in how to decide who to serve? Or did you develop that on your own?
We had a bartender meeting every year, and you couldn't become a bartender unless you went to one of those meetings. And we had a list of what to look for, yes.
Well, do you remember, are there any other stories you'd like to talk about? Just things that happened over the years that might be of interest?
There were a lot of stories. Basically, we held people, and they had a lot because they had fun and because they were helping Proctors, and there was a sense of pride involved with it. Also, I can probably think of some funny stories if I had a little more time. I remember some group rented the theater, and I forgot what it was, and we wanted to. There was a party at the Greek Hellenic Center there over on, where is that? Liberty Street?
Yes.
Liberty Street. And which they were serving, but they wanted us to serve mixed drinks. Well, we never served mixed drinks. That was just too much to ask. But this was really important because we could make a lot of money on it. So I recruited some of my good friends who were more experienced in drinking, and I said, "Can you do this? Can you make Bloody Marys and stuff like that?" And they were a little nervous, but they went over ahead when the show was just about over to get ready, and there were, I think, 300 or 500 patrons that appeared at the bar instantly, and then the show was over. And we had 4 or 5 volunteers who were nervous about serving anyway. And one of my friends came up to me after it was all over and said, "Don't ever ask me to do anything again." I didn't.
So when we had opening night at Proctors, were you there for the Blackstone show?
No, I was. That was a little bit before. I think that was a year before me.
Okay, I wondered if you just attended it because we have some pretty wonderful stories about it, and I'm trying to get everybody's view.
Yeah, the things that I've heard have been from people that were there. I wasn't there myself. Mm-hmm. And I don't know why. I don't know. I guess I was not interested in magic.
So, Paul, in an average month, when you were in charge of the bartenders, how many hours do you think you would personally have been at the theater?
Oh, that's a hard one to answer. I was at the theater every week for sure, 2 or 3 times, depending on the paperwork that had to be done. And my job was to just kind of make sure that the setup and the arrangement and the rules were the same for Tuesday night's crowd as for Wednesday night's crowd.
So tell me, did you have a great interest in the theater yourself, or were you involved with Proctors more as a community kind of, say of Proctors?
I still really like the performing arts, almost all of them. And as a result of volunteering at Proctors, I've added ballet to my list of interests, which I never did before. So, yeah, I would say choral singing is what is my favorite. But it all attaches.
I know that when you retired from being chair of the bartenders, there was a fund set up, and we now have the opportunity to allow a chorus or a class to come to Proctor's to a choral performance, basically in your honor. And I think that's a wonderful tribute to you.
Well, I don't know if you want to include this in the interview. I am concerned about the future of choral singing because, frankly, most choruses are filled with gray-haired people, and there are no young people singing. So this was a way to encourage, particularly high school people, and show them that there is more to the world than just a band or a pep rally band or whatever.
Well, it's a great contribution you're making to try and encourage that.
And as far as I know, there are 7 or 8 different high schools, each of which get a couple of tickets, and then the kids come and see the show.
And you're also...
And there's usually at least one choral group as part of the season. Chanticleer this year.
You're very fortunate that Philip Morris is also a person who enjoys choral music and likes to have it, so that's a help.
He's a good singer, too.
He's a great singer.
Right.
And if he had more time, he'd be singing more in more groups.
I think you're right.
Well, is there anything else you'd like to tell me about the experiences you had here?
Well, some of it has to do with the performers. I swear we have had absolutely some of the best performers that this country, and this actually more than this country has available to it. We've had we sold out James Galway 4 times in the beginning. We sold out Ethel Perlman 3 or 4 times, and that's absolutely fantastic. And I wouldn't have seen any of those if it hadn't been for Proctors. I mean, I might have, but not anywhere near the number that I did. Mm-hmm. I remember when Chorus Line first came. It was so exciting for some reason. I don't know why. And Donna McKechnie, who was the original star of Chorus Line, was in the group that came. So after work, when the trucks arrived, a number of us went running out before we went home from work. We stopped at the back of the theater, and there were 12 or 13 big trucks out there. Mm-hmm. And I thought, Chorus Line has no scenery. Chorus Line how can it have all those trucks? Well, come to think about it, there were so many lights that lit up that show, and there was mirrors that Donna McKechnie danced in front of, and that took up all of that truck space. It was unbelievable. I couldn't believe I saw all these trucks back there.
So you learned a few tricks of the different shows and had an opportunity to really meet some of the people, which is a great thing.
Right. Yeah, right.
So I think
they sometimes had receptions in which the star would come and you get a chance to serve them or whatever. Most of the people in show business are really nice in spite of what we read about them.
That's a good point. Well, Paul, it's really been a pleasure speaking with you today. I hope that our viewers will enjoy the historical material that we have put together for you and learn from it. And thank you for watching, and thank you, Paul, for your participation today.
Well, thanks for asking me. Proctors has been very important to me for a long time.
Great.
Okay, thanks a lot. Bye.